9 signs you're smarter than you think, but don't realize it. You've probably been told at some point in your life, directly or indirectly, that you're average. Maybe you didn't ace every test. Maybe you freeze up when someone calls you the smart one in the room. Maybe you just quietly assume that the people around you have it more figured out than you do. But here's what psychology has known for decades, and what most people never hear. The people who are most uncertain about their own intelligence are often the ones who have the most of it. That's not a motivational quote. That's science. And today on MindVeil, we're breaking down 9 signs grounded in real psychological research that you are far smarter than you've been giving yourself credit for. These aren't flattery. They're not feel-good fluff. Every single one of these will make you stop and think, wait, that's actually me. Stay with us until the end, because sign number 7 is probably the most obvious one, and yet almost nobody connects it to intelligence. Most people think it's a flaw. Let's get into it. Sign number 1. You doubt your own intelligence. Let's start with the one that sounds the most backwards, but is actually the most well-supported by science. There is a famous psychological phenomenon discovered by Cornell University researchers David Dunning and Justin Kruger. You've probably heard of it, the Dunning-Kruger Effect. And here's what it says, in plain terms. People with lower skills or knowledge tend to consistently overestimate their own mental abilities, while intelligent people are far more aware of their limitations. Read that again. The less you actually know, the more confident you feel. And the more capable you are, the more you question yourself. This is why the most genuinely brilliant people in history were rarely the loudest ones in the room. They were the ones sitting quietly, wondering if they really had it all figured out. Einstein himself said the more he learned, the more he realized how much he didn't know. So if you clicked on this video because you genuinely weren't sure whether you were smart, that uncertainty itself is one of the strongest signals that your brain is working at a higher level than you think. The fool is always certain. The thinker is always questioning. If that's you, you're already ahead of more people than you realize. Sign number 2. You can't stop asking why. Think about the last time you learned something, anything, and instead of accepting it at face value, your brain immediately started asking follow-up questions. Why does that work? What happens if you change one variable? Who decided this was true? That instinct, that itch for deeper understanding, is one of the most consistent markers of high intelligence that psychologists have identified. When you're genuinely curious, your brain's learning systems activate at a higher level. In a brain imaging study, participants remembered information better when they were in a state of high curiosity. Even incidental facts absorbed during that period improved. The effect was tied to hippocampal memory networks and dopamine pathways, the brain's core memory and motivation systems. In other words, curiosity doesn't just feel good. It literally rewires how your brain stores and connects information. Smart people have an insatiable curiosity. It's not just about wanting to know the answer to a trivia question or solve a puzzle. It's about a genuine desire to understand the world and the people in it. They want to dive deeper, to see the connections between things, and to explore the why behind the what. So if you're the person who goes down a Wikipedia rabbit hole at 1 in the morning trying to understand how something works, that's not distraction. That's your brain doing exactly what highly intelligent brains do. Curiosity isn't a personality quirk. It's a cognitive engine, and yours is running. Sign number 3. You're comfortable saying, I don't know. This one stings a little, because we live in a world that rewards people who sound like they have answers, even when they don't. But here's what research consistently shows. Owning the limits of your knowledge is a strength, not a deficit. Intellectual humility is linked to better learning, open-mindedness, and reasoning quality. People who acknowledge what they don't know are more likely to revise their opinions when presented with solid evidence and seek feedback early rather than defending a wrong position. Think about what it actually takes to say, I don't know out loud. You have to have enough self-awareness to recognize the gap. You have to be secure enough not to fake it. And you have to be curious enough to want to fill that gap rather than ignore it. That combination of awareness, security, and curiosity is not common. Most people would rather bluff their way through a conversation than admit ignorance. That's not confidence. That's insecurity dressed up as confidence. The person who says, "I don't know, let me find out," is not the least smart person in the room. They're often the most honest and the fastest learner. If that's a habit you have, even if it sometimes feels embarrassing, it's a cognitive strength. And science backs that up. Sign number 4. You feel things more intensely than other people seem to. A lot of highly intelligent people go through life thinking something is wrong with them emotionally. They feel things deeply. They overthink conversations. They replay situations in their heads long after they're over. They sense tension in a room before anyone said a word. And they assume this makes them weaker, not smarter. Here's what the research says. Research published in the journal Intelligence suggests that people with higher IQs report more mood and anxiety disorder diagnoses than the national average. This could be because highly intelligent people tend to overthink everything, driven by a pursuit of perfection and a high degree of self-reflection. This level of neurological overactivity is linked to more intense emotional processing. This isn't a flaw. It's the price of a brain that processes information at a deeper level. The same neural machinery that helps you notice patterns, anticipate outcomes, and read situations accurately is the same machinery that keeps you up at 2 a.m. running through every possible way something could go wrong. Psychologist Dr. Adam Perkins from King's College London found that people with higher intelligence are more prone to worrying because their brains are constantly running simulations, imagining scenarios that haven't happened yet. That's not weakness. That's a high-functioning predictive brain doing its job. The trick is learning to manage the intensity, but the intensity itself, that's a feature, not a bug. Sign number 5. You actually enjoy being alone. Not because you hate people, not because you're antisocial, but because some of your best thinking happens when the world goes quiet. A study published in the British Journal of Psychology found a correlation between contentedness with being alone and intelligence. Alone time supports thinking, prioritizing, and planning, reinforcing self-control and deeper cognitive processing. Here's why this makes sense. When you're in constant social environments, your brain is largely occupied with managing impressions, reading other people, and navigating group dynamics. All of that is cognitively demanding. Time alone strips all of that away and gives your brain space to actually think, to connect ideas, process experiences, and generate insight. A study from the British Journal of Psychology found that smarter individuals were more likely to experience lower life satisfaction with more frequent socialization with friends. This doesn't mean intelligent people are loners who despise connection. It means they have a deeper relationship with solitude than the average person, and they recognize its value. If you've ever turned down plans because you genuinely needed quiet time to recharge and think, and you felt slightly guilty about it, like maybe you're being antisocial, let go of that guilt. Your brain is asking for what it needs, and what it needs is space to be brilliant. Sign number 6. You're funnier than the average person. You might not think of humor as a sign of intelligence, but psychologists have been making this connection for years, and the evidence is surprisingly strong. A University of New Mexico psychology study found that professional comedians and people who wrote funnier captions scored significantly higher on verbal intelligence measures. And this makes perfect sense when you think about what humor actually requires. To be genuinely funny, not just silly, but actually funny, you have to hold multiple ideas in your head simultaneously. You have to understand context, timing, subverted expectations, wordplay, and social dynamics. You have to predict what the other person is thinking, then take them somewhere they didn't expect. That is not a simple cognitive task. That is high-level mental processing happening in real time. Dark humor appreciation in particular has been linked to higher intelligence. A study published in the journal Cognitive Processing found that the ability to appreciate complex or dark humor, treating difficult subjects with wit rather than discomfort, was correlated with higher intelligence and emotional stability. So if you're the person who makes the whole room laugh, or who sends the text that makes someone spit out their drink, your brain is doing something genuinely complex. You're just too busy making people laugh to notice how impressive it actually is. Sign number 7. Your workspace is a mess and you work better that way. Here it is. The one you didn't see coming. The one most people dismiss as an excuse. And yet the science is clear. Kathleen Voss from the University of Minnesota found that messier people tend to generate more creative ideas. In a study published in Psychological Science, 2 groups were asked to come up with creative uses for a ping pong ball. The group in the messier room produced significantly more creative and unconventional responses than those in the tidy space. Creativity is considered a hallmark of most geniuses. The participants with neat rooms had less creative responses than those with messier rooms. Now, this doesn't mean that chaos is a substitute for discipline. It doesn't mean you should never clean. But it does mean that the person who's always been slightly embarrassed by the organized chaos of their desk, their room, their notes, that person's brain may actually be thriving in that environment. Messy thinkers make unexpected connections. They pull from different piles, different references, different threads simultaneously. That's not disorganization. That's a nonlinear mind doing what nonlinear minds do best. The world rewards visible neatness. But breakthrough thinking is rarely neat. And your brain might already know that. Sign number 8. You catch mistakes, including your own. Have you ever hit send on a message and immediately spotted the typo? Or finished a task and immediately started mentally reviewing everything that could have gone wrong? Or noticed a logical inconsistency in something someone said before they'd even finished saying it? That's not just attention to detail. That's a specific neurological capability called error monitoring, and it's strongly linked to cognitive ability. Brains that notice errors quickly tend to adapt faster. A neural signal called the error-related negativity, ERN, spikes milliseconds after you make a mistake. Larger ERN responses have been linked to better learning from negative feedback and faster behavioral correction. In plain language, your brain is running a background quality control process at all times. Most people don't have this running at a high sensitivity. For you, it's almost involuntary. You catch things, in yourself and in others, that most people walk right past. This also connects to what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. Metacognition, monitoring and evaluating your own thinking, is linked to better learning and decision-making, and it develops with age and practice. Research shows metacognitive ability shapes how we form global beliefs about our own performance. If you regularly audit your own decisions, second-guess your first instincts, and actively try to catch your own blind spots, you are doing something most people literally do not have the cognitive architecture to do consistently. That is a real, measurable form of intelligence. And it's one of the most practically useful ones that exists. Sign number 9. You think before you speak, even when it costs you. In a world that rewards quick, confident answers, being the person who pauses before responding can feel like a disadvantage. People might see you as hesitant. Maybe you've lost the moment in a conversation because you were still formulating your thought while someone else jumped in. But here's what that pause actually represents. A 2008 Yale University psychology study showed that highly intelligent people tend to stay open-minded to others' points of view, not formulating their own until hearing multiple perspectives. And crucially, once formed, those opinions were more confident and less easily manipulated. You're not slow. You're processing at a deeper level. You're not withholding. You're building a more complete picture before committing. This is also tied to a cognitive trait called low-delay discounting, the ability to resist the immediate in favor of something better later. Research shows that choosing a larger, later reward over a smaller, immediate one is associated with higher cognitive ability. A meta-analysis found a reliable link between this kind of patience and general intelligence. The person who blurts out the first answer gets the spotlight, but the person who waits, thinks, and then speaks with precision, that person is usually the one who's actually right. Intelligence isn't always the loudest voice. It's often the most deliberate one. And if you've ever felt like your pace of processing is a weakness in a fast-moving world, it's not. It's your brain refusing to be sloppy. That's not a liability. That's a standard. So here's where we land. 9 signs. 9 traits that most people carry quietly, assuming they mean nothing, or worse, assuming they're flaws. Doubt, curiosity, emotional depth, the need for solitude, a messy desk, a mind that won't stop checking itself. These aren't weaknesses. According to decades of psychological research, they are the quiet fingerprints of a genuinely intelligent mind. The tragedy isn't being less smart than you think. The real tragedy is being more intelligent than you've ever allowed yourself to believe, and spending your whole life underestimating yourself because of it. Intelligence doesn't announce itself. It asks questions at midnight. It sits quietly in the corner, watching. It catches the thing everyone else missed. It laughs at things other people don't quite understand yet. That sounds a lot like you. This has been MindVeil. If this hit different today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you recognize yourself in more than 5 of these signs, drop it in the comments. We read them all. Until next time, keep thinking deeper. If you love this, subscribe for more.